welcome everyone here tonight. I want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you so much for coming out and taking part in this. Our goal here is to educate as many people as we can in our community on our elected leaders, our potential elected leaders. I'd like to ask you to silence your cell phone if you could, so we don't have any interruptions once we start. I'd like to let you know that this event is sponsored by the Lake Federated Republican Women's Club and the North Lake Tea Party. Yeah, North Lake Tea Party. And, we've got a couple of other forums planned. There is a Flag Day event held by the Lake County Republicans over here on Main Street on June 14th. It's from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on a Thursday, June 14th, which is Flag Day. We also have a candidate forum coming up Thursday, June 21st in this room at 6:30 p.m. We have 6 school board candidates. That's a nonpartisan race. We also have a candidate forum Wednesday, candidate forum for county commissioner on June 27th in this room at 6:30 as well. And we have a U.S. House Congressional District 6 candidate forum scheduled for Thursday, July 19th as well. I'd like you to know that all of our questions at this forum are going to be through our moderator from the podium here. We'd ask you to honor that. We do have some audience questions that are going to be read here as well. I think that's about it for me, and I'd like to again welcome everybody and thank you so much for coming out and participating in this. And I would like to introduce our moderator, a good friend of ours, Don Marks. Please give Don a hand.
You know, it's interesting that you get picked because you can't vote. I'm in District 31. This is District 32. So we attempted to make sure that there was no bias in what we were doing. I told all our candidates that we're going to do the following things. They picked a card to determine their order of the first part of the meeting is where they do a 2-minute self-introduction. They will get a green light at 1 minute and 30 seconds. And they will get a red light at 2 minutes, and then Jan will have something heavy in her hand, and if you go much beyond 2 minutes, we will in fact ask you to dodge whatever she's throwing. Second, we have 41 questions. They are on 3x5, or actually 4x6 cards, so that there is no bias, there is no pre-selection. We're going to ask each of the candidates to give us a number between 1 and 41. Whatever number they pick, all 3 of them will get that same question. And then there will be a 2-minute conclusion, and they have also picked cards to give the order, so this will all be random. So as we start the meeting, I'm going to ask you to stand, and I'm going to give the invocation first, and then we will give the pledge. And this is a little different, so I hope that everybody is okay with it. And it starts out and says, as usual, kids give us a different perspective of what we already know. This is called Shirley and Marcy. See, it seems that a mother was concerned that her kindergarten son was walking to school by himself. And in these days and times, we can understand that. He didn't want his mother to walk with him, and yet she wanted to give him the feeling of independence, but yet know that he was safe. She asked her neighbor if she would please follow him to school in the mornings, staying at a distance, so he probably wouldn't notice her. She said that since she was up early and with her toddler anyway, it would be a great way for them to get some exercise as well. So she agreed. The next school day, the neighbor and her little girlfriend set out following behind Timmy as they walked to school with another neighbor girl he knew. She said she did this, for the whole week. As the two walked and chatted and kicked stones and twigs, Timmy, little friend, noticed that the same lady was following them every day. Finally, she said to Timmy, "Have you noticed that lady following us to school all week? Do you know her?" And Timmy nonchalantly replied, "Yes, I know her." And the little girl said, "Then who is she?" "That's just Shirley Goodnest," Timmy replied, "and her daughter Marcy, Shirley Goodnest." "Who in the heck is she, and why is she following us?" Well, Timmy explained that every night his mom makes her say the 23rd Psalm with my prayers, because she worries about me so much. And in the Psalm it says, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life." So I guess I'm just going to have to get used to that. So please ask the Lord to bless us and keep us, that the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. And may surely goodness and mercy be with you today and always. In God's name we pray, and may we all say, Amen. Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Would you please come up and sit down? Again, we drew cards or straws or whatever you want to call it in order to have a random selection. Shannon Elswick pulled number 1. I don't know if that's good or bad. In Toastmasters, you generally like to be near the end of a competition, but this is the way it came out. So, Shannon, would you please stand and give us a 2-minute self-introduction and tell us whatever you want us to know about you.
Well, thanks. I don't mind going first because what I have to say is not going to change in the next 3, 4, 5 minutes. My name is Shannon Elswick. I'm running for House District 32. Many thanks to the Lake Federated Republican Women and the North Lake Tea Party for sponsoring. Thank you all so much for being here. I was born into a conservative family, so I've been a conservative my whole life. I've been a registered Republican for 45 years. I'm not supposed to tell you how old I am, so I won't. But, you know, Becky and I drove into Lake County the first time in 1993 as we were interviewing for a new job. And we raised our children here. We've been in South Lake County in the district all that time. My career was one of bedpans to boardrooms. And it's not to brag, it's just to say I started out in the mid-70s as an orderly, and I retired from healthcare as a senior executive with a large portfolio and lots of employees, and I've been teaching at the university for the last 5 years. My conservative values are very strong when it comes to issues such as the sorry, little blank there. Second Amendment certainly is very dear to my heart. I believe that pro-life is something that we should all support. Definitely pro-traditional marriage. I believe that in this particular race we're very fortunate because we have 3 candidates who all bring a different experience level to the fore. We've been out working, talking to people, and Jan's going to tell me that I should say most of the rest of what I have to say for the end. But again, I just want to thank you so much. Through our question and answers, you'll get to know us a little better. And then I'll find out what I was supposed to say earlier when I finish up later. So thank you all so much.
Good evening, my name.
Anthony, sit down. Our second candidate is Monica Wofford.
I'm more than happy to yield the floor.
We pulled cards. You got number 2. You were talking number 2, 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thank you all for braving the rain and for being here this evening. What a privilege and pleasure to speak with each of you. My name is Monica Wofford. I am a candidate for the Florida House in District 32, as are all 3 of the individuals you see before you. And the reason I'm running is because this is the community where my time, my money, my family, and my business reside and are spent. My incredible love of my life is in the room. We were just married in October. He was in the room. There he is, right there. Who is a French chef, and the reason for which I run from animals and down treadmills and lots of other things. Yet the reason I am running, in addition to this being where our time and our family resides, is to contribute business sense, common sense, and leadership in an area where I think at times it might be missing. And I think at a federal level, the business sense is certainly paying off for us in multiple ways. And at the state level, perhaps it's time to utilize some of that additional business sense as well. I've owned a business for the last 15 years. It is my privilege and pleasure to both coach CEOs for a living, consult with corporations for a living, and as some of you are starting to gather the name of my book, which has been spread around, been making difficult people disappear for years. That allows me to have developed a tremendous number of skills in the area of communication and collaboration and reaching across the aisle where people may not agree and we may not have the same opinions for the purpose of making progress. So my intent in running is to not become a politician, but to make progress in spite of the politics. And it would be my privilege, pleasure, and honor as a conservative Republican, a strong proponent of our Second Amendment, a strong believer in the way in which our country was founded and the documents on which it was founded, to serve in this capacity. Don't throw it. Don't throw it.
Thank you. Now 3, Anthony Sabatini. 2 minutes.
Good evening, Anthony Sabatini. First, I want to thank everybody who came out here tonight. You've definitely done your duty in vetting the candidates and being responsible who it is that's making the big decisions in this community. And I definitely want to thank that core group of people who run all the good conservative organizations right here in Lake County that I've stood with for the last few years. The Lake County Tea Party, the Lake Federated Women's Club, the REC, and all those people who I think have really done an amazing job of vetting these candidates. I think we've got to look at what the question is we're supposed to be addressing tonight. I think the question really is not who might up here do a pretty good job in Tallahassee or who we can hope does a very good job because of their experience. I think what we really need to be asking is who here has a proven record on the conservative issues that matter most to Floridians and Americans, period. And the last 2 years, I think you'll see that when it comes to religious liberty, quality of life, the Second Amendment, transparency, accountability, fighting against tax increases, fighting against out-of-control, unaccountable government. One of the candidates up here has a very strong conservative record for the last 2 years as a city commissioner in Eustis. I've been very blessed with that opportunity, and I want to take that conservative fight to Tallahassee now. In addition to that, I've already taken an oath to preserve, protect, and defend our Constitution. I did it when I joined the Florida Army National Guard 10 years ago this summer. What I'm asking you to do is to please allow me the opportunity to take that oath again, to protect, defend, and preserve our Constitution of this state and this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to remind the 3 candidates, I'm going to ask one of you to give a number, then we will rotate that number. We will go through the stack of questions, and all 3 of you will be given the opportunity to answer that question. Then we'll go on to the next one. So, Shannon, let's start with you. Between 1 and 41.
19.
19. Give me a second. They're all in numerical order. Okay, question number 19 deals with the budget. Do you agree or disagree that Medicaid expansion is right choice for Florida? Anthony, we're going to start with you.
Absolutely not. Medicaid is a horrible program. Medicine should not be socialized. I think it was a very courageous thing that our House did by denying the expansion of Medicaid under Obama just a few years ago. I can proudly say that I'll be up there fighting to make sure that the expansion of Medicaid does not happen in Florida and look for more innovative, free market ways to provide better medicine here in Florida. I can also proudly say I'm not endorsed, as is my opponent, by the person who fought hardest to expand Medicaid in the state of Florida, Andy Gardner, in the Senate. He's proudly endorsed my opponent. Apparently they see eye to eye when it comes to the idea of medicine and socialized medicine. I disagree with them on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Monica, let's ask you to go second. I'll read the question. It deals with the budget. Do you agree or disagree that Medicaid expansion is the right choice for Florida?
Thank you for asking the question. And/or Shannon, thanks for picking 19. I do not agree that Medicaid expansion is the right choice for our state. I also would push for rolling back Obamacare initiatives, for not expanding Medicaid. And the reason being is, were it to go forward, it would saddle taxpayers with billions of additional dollars without making any difference positively in the quality of health care that we receive. And that at the state level is not something I think we're prepared for, nor something I think is appropriate for our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Our third candidate, the same question. I'll read it again. Do you agree or disagree that Medicaid expansion is the right choice for Florida? Shannon?
So, assumptions can be a horrible thing. I'm on record with Florida Medical Association, the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and the Hospital Association as being against Medicaid expansion. Much to the dismay of many of the people I worked with for many years. Medicaid is not a horrible program. Medicaid serves the needs of many people. Medicaid has management issues and it has opportunities to improve. The problem with expansion is when you expand roles, you're expanding what is in essence an entitlement program. And as politicians, we have no ability whatsoever to take away entitlements once we have expanded them. The last part is federal government only guarantees the additional funding for expanded Medicaid for a limited amount of time. When that funding expires, if we've expanded roles, we're going to be left holding the bag for those recipients of that program. So I do not support Medicaid expansion.
Thank you very much. And if you don't mind me referring to you all by first name, I hope you don't mind. Monica, give me a number between 1 and 41.
7.
Okay, question number 7 deals with the environment. It says that approximately 1/3 of Florida's land is government-owned and designated as conservation lands by either federal, state, or local governments. Is this too much, too little, or about right? What criteria would you use to determine whether or not government should purchase Florida conservation land? Let's start with Anthony.
Thank you. Yes, well, I think what you've described is honestly the problem of trying to do everything through a ballot initiative. We don't want to go the way of California where we take these clunky programs, shove them into the Constitution, you can't mess with them, and then they mandate X amount of dollars to these programs that the legislature can't even analyze. We need to trust the legislative process. Our founding fathers created it for a very good reason. I disagree with the amount of land that Florida will eventually own if they take the constitutional amendment from just a few years ago literally. I think the way we should analyze how much land Florida has and should have is by appointing a neutral panel of the people who were selected in some way that could be considered nonpartisan, and they can choose what land truly needs to be protected. There is some great land in Florida that honestly, as Florida continues to grow at breakneck speed, we should obtain and we should preserve. But there's a lot of land in Florida that we own right now we can't even afford to manage. So I think it's something we should take a look at, and honestly, I'm err on the side that we already own too much land.
Thank you very much. Monica. The question is, environment. Approximately 1/3 of Florida's land is government-owned and designated as conservation land by either federal, state, or local governments. Is this too much, too little, or about right? What criteria would you use to determine whether or not government should purchase Florida conservation land?
Thank you, Don. The criteria question is one I believe is a bit premature to answer, and here's why. I don't know that any of us in this room are conservation experts. I do, however, believe that there are times when the government participates in what we might call an overreach. Is this one of those circumstances? For someone to say who is in a political position, we have too much or too little, without surrounding themselves with a cadre of experts who are experts in this area, who study in this area, and who have far more information about our water quality, our aquifer, our natural treasures, and our conservation. So for me to make that statement and provide you with that criteria, I would prefer to get far more information. In that process, what I will say is we have so much to protect in this state. And it is of grave concern that we have water quality and water quantity issues that seem not to be on the top minds of our voters, and in some cases on the top minds of our politicians. But this is something we need to look at much further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shannon, the question again deals with environment. Approximately 1/3 of Florida's land is government-owned and designated as conservation lands by either federal, state, or local governments. Is this too much, too little, or about right? What criteria would you use to determine whether or not government should purchase Florida conservation land?
Thanks. I agree with Monica to the extent that I don't have an informed scientific opinion that says it's too much or too little. I will tell you, having flown over the state, there is an awful lot of land that is already protected. I think criteria really, if we were in business, a business decision is, are you going to put something on the balance sheet to stabilize your business? I don't think that the state should be in the business of putting property on quote-unquote the state rolls. But I do think that as we look at things like water, we look at things like recreation and conservation from natural resources perspective, I think those are all criteria that we should be evaluating. I do agree that these should be informed decisions that are done on an as-need basis, not based on a constitutional amendment that says we should spend this much money every year and buy more land.
Thank you very much. I messed up my notes. Which one of the three of you has not given the number? Anthony. Anthony, between 1 and 41.
1.
1. This deals with school safety. Do you agree or disagree that the 2018 school safety bill, Senate Bill 7026, should be improved? Why don't we start with you, Anthony?
I think the bill made a lot of mistakes, some of them fundamental mistakes. To begin with, the gun ban, the illegal, unconstitutional restriction on long firearms telling 18, 19, and 20-year-olds that they can't purchase a firearm, I think is out of the ballpark unconstitutional, unbelievable, and I'm ashamed that so many legislatures voted for that. The first thing I'll do when I get to Tallahassee is repeal and fight to repeal those aspects of the law, including the waiting time period. In terms of the more technical question of how much money we should be spending at the local level to protect our schools, that's a murky question. I do think that, honestly, after taking the following our very professional school board who's claimed, it's their opinion that it's not enough money to get the job done, honestly, I'd be okay with increasing the funding for that program. When I get to Tallahassee, I would pledge to take a look at that and boost it from the state level to get more law enforcement on state dollars in our school system, putting the burden on the local government for that.
Thank you. Shannon, the question is, do you agree or disagree that the 2018 school safety bill, Senate Bill 7026, should be improved?
Should be improved, yes. And exactly what Anthony said. Now, I believe that the NRA's legal challenge may well come through, and that may be taken care of before we get there, and I would certainly support that as well. I'll tell you what I do believe is that we're trying to put a blanket over a bunch of different things, and we don't fully understand what it is. I will tell you, if you go all the way down to the bottom, I believe it's all about social and emotional development that's not happening in the home, and that's not something we're going to fix with dollars. I will tell you, and I need to say this for the record, I support police plus guardian, and I love to see Lake County leading the edge for that. I think that's the kind of program we need around the state. The law already provides for that. But the part about restricting guns for 20, 19, 18-year-olds, it is not constitutional, and it should not have been approved.
Monica, the question again is school safety. Do you agree or disagree that the 2018 school safety bill, Senate Bill 7026, should be improved?
Thank you, Don. Yes, and one of the worst things we can do is send politicians to Tallahassee with misinformation. The bill is 112 pages long. In it, it says surrender 34 times. This is part of the challenge with the bill. A repeal act is already in process, already being worked on for presentation for next session. However, the reason that I think this bill needs improvement is it encroaches upon our Second Amendment rights on a very slippery slope. Technically, an 18 to 21-year-old may still use, own, be given as a gift, and purchase privately a firearm. What they cannot do is purchase publicly. So they were able to get in this particular regulation without ticking off too many people. But it starts out to be a very slippery slope, making the next encroachment on our Second Amendment much easier. What it also does, I fear, is not protect our children. In the Parkland shooting and all those preceding it, the people who committed the tragedy broke several laws that are already on the books. What we need not to do is mandate lawbreakers.
Monica, give me a number between 1 and 41.
3.
3?
Yes, sir.
The question is, school safety. Do you agree or disagree that 2018 school safety bill, Senate Bill 7026, was the correct response by the Florida legislature to the Parkland shooting? If not, what would you have done? Shannon?
Is that not duplicated?
No. We have talked about many of the things. I think if we really want to get to the core, we should stop blaming the guns. More people die in auto accidents every year. We're not blaming the automobiles, right? So at this point, when we say, why are these children getting to the point where they're able or willing to go and pick up a gun and shoot somebody, I think there's so many issues that go all the way back to the development. So it's not just video games either. It's just the fact that our children are not getting basic social and emotional skills, and the system that we have moves them into alternative schools when they probably need to be more surrounded by peers and have more contact. I also believe that we really need to focus on the counselors and the ability that they have with so many kids that are under their charge to actually talk to our students and to do check-in on them. I think the class size restrictions were for a reason. There should also be restrictions on the number of counselors per student.
Monica, school safety. Do you agree or disagree that 2018 school safety bill, Senate Bill 7026, was the correct response by the Florida legislature to the Parkland shooting? If not, what would you have done?
Thank you. I don't believe it was the correct maneuver. I think it was the best choice they had in the time they had, and it sucked the last 3 weeks out of session so that other legislation wasn't passed in the wake of this event-based legislation. This is centered, in my opinion, on 4 specific issues. One is mental health and a system called CFIX, Central Florida Information Exchange. We are rated as a low priority, thus the information exchange for which our students and their issues are not being talked about on all channels equally. So those that need to be in the know don't all have the information and can act. Then secondly, the way our schools are built, there are not minimum safety standards that are being put in place to protect our students. Third, how do we keep our children safe? It's not to mandate guns. It's to figure out, can we possibly mandate better funding of mental health? Can we possibly provide a program such as law enforcement being in the schools to the tune of $1.3 million, which has already been allocated for our district to keep our children safe? And then fourth, I think this is in large part about something I'll tell you later.
Anthony, the question again is school safety. Do you agree or disagree that the 2018 school safety bill, Senate Bill 7026, was the correct response by the Florida legislature to the Parkland shooting? If not, what would you have done?
I believe it's the incorrect response. Any gun control, gun restriction, and all that sort of blaming everybody but the actual perpetrator is always bad. These sorts of issues politicians will talk about all day, but the politically incorrect truth is that there's very little they can do about them. These are problems that get changed through the mores of society, not laws. And if anyone doesn't think that this is changing this generation that I'm part of and really just behind me, they're clearly wrong. But basically, people know that we need to be involved in everyone's lives in our community. We need to know what's going on around our neighbors, our children, brothers, classmates, teammates, and all of that. And that's what's happened. X amount of these students have just fallen through the cracks. And once they're through the crack, I mean, there's almost nothing you can do to prevent this kind of violence and destruction. So for me, it's a problem of the heart. It's a deeper problem. We need a larger focus on community. And if there's one thing I would like to boost in terms of the funding of the bill, it would be the mental health aspect. Different types of diverse mental health issues, I think, are at heart of a lot of these disasters.
Thank you. Dan, give me a number, 1 to 41.
39.
I knew it. I knew you
It's amazing, you picked my age.
39 and a half.
Well, it's the 21st anniversary of my 39th birthday. This is an audience question. It is subject higher education. Florida universities are funded, but the flagship institution for Lake Sumter County's Lake Sumter State College continues to lag behind its peers in quality of facilities and other budgetary issues. What would you do to ensure, maybe we should have put a number of words in the question. What would you do to ensure Lake Sumter State College exemplifies your vision of what higher education in your district should be? Let's start with Chip.
Okay, interesting question, and I think it cuts across all levels. Because I'm in higher education now, because I spent time with Becky when she was doing her K-12 education as a school board member, and also because I've been affiliated with the State College for so many years, what we see is that there's an ebb and flow in the legislature that moves from leadership to leadership to leadership as to, do we favor the universities, do we favor the state colleges, do we pay attention to the technical colleges, and how do we fund K-12. I think that part of the issue is we ought to be going by the Constitution that says that there's supposed to be equality in education across the spectrum. So I'm getting this recorded by somebody who's going to go and show it to his boss. But the point is, it's not equal. And the universities generally are drawing down the lion's share while everyone else is getting the crumbs, and I think that needs to be addressed.
Anthony, higher education. Florida universities are well funded, but the flagship institution of Lake and Sumter counties, Lake Sumter State College, continues to lag behind its peers in quality of facilities and other budgetary issues. What will you do to ensure Lake Sumter State College exemplifies your vision of what higher education in your district should be?
Thank you for the question. Long answer, very short. The problem is special interests. those lobbyists and those people who have strong networks with the research universities of this state are doing everything they can to make community colleges and technical vocational education the last seat on the bus. Okay, I'm a product of the University of Florida, but I'll tell you this much. I grew up here in Lake County. The majority of my friends went to Lake Sumter, and I still call it Vo-Tech. Those are the schools that will be my priority that I'll be fighting for when I get to Tallahassee. And the reason is community college and technical and vocational education, that's the pathway to the middle class for people who grew up right here in Lake County. And it needs our utmost focus. If it means anything, my little palm card, I put it right at the top. Technical and vocational education. I put community college in there because in many ways it's a first stepping stone for those who don't exactly know exactly what it is they want to do. And they want to stay at home and kind of think about it a little bit more. I would definitely pledge to make that my utmost priority. Education is the key function of the state, and that should be our number one concern. Thank you.
Monica, the question again, higher education. Florida universities are well funded, but the flagship institution for Lake and Sumter counties, Lake Sumter State College, continues to lag behind in its peers in quality of facilities and other budgetary issues. What will you do to ensure that Lake Sumter State College exemplifies your vision of what higher education in your district should be?
Thank you, Don. As we have members in the audience from Lake Sumter, this is a very important question, particularly for this audience. There are three things that I would endeavor to do to ensure proper funding is provided. Number one is ask why. Why are we lagging behind? Number two is to fight. When you are representative from District 32, you fight for the issues most important and relevant to your constituents in District 32. Not the district in which you used to live, not the other special interests you might be connected to, or the voting constituents that you have the privilege to represent. So finding out why, where's the money being shifted to instead? Why isn't the money being sent there? And number three would be to connect. Meaning, connect direct flow from Lake Sumter to a number of employers in the area. Make them absolutely viable, irreplaceable, and necessary, as well as relevant. And as a vocational education student versus someone who merely talks about it, I went through vocational ed and would have you in my foresight.
Candidates, since we're going back and forth, and I don't want to give any one candidate the opportunity to pick a number, would you mind if I went to the audience and asked them to pick a number between 1 and 41? That's fine. Let's start with Margie. Margie, between 1 and 41.
36.
36. This question is rule of law for all. What will you do to ensure that the rule of law is followed by all cities in Florida, i.e. no sanctuary cities? Let's start with Shem.
So, like Anthony in 1978, although it's not when he did it, but in 1978 I swore an oath to protect, defend, and support the Constitution of the United States. When I was discharged 6 years later, there was no ceremony that said, okay, now you're relieved of that responsibility. The rule of law is clear. Florida, it would be wonderful if we had an anti-sanctuary city bill that would come from the state of Florida. And it's been passed in the House repeatedly. It cannot get through the committee in the Senate. So I would be right there to sponsor that bill again and keep pushing to make sure we get it through the House. The real issue has to be the President of the Senate has to appoint members to the appropriate committee that will let that bill get out of the Senate. It should not be necessary for us to pass a law to tell people that they have to obey the law. But apparently in this country right now, we need a law to tell people that they have to obey the law in the state of Florida because that's the law.
What a unique concept. Rule of law. What will you do to ensure that the rule of law is followed by all cities in Florida, i.e. no sanctuary cities? Let's ask Monica to answer that.
I just got an email.
Every time I hear the words rule of law, I think of Representative Metz and have the highest admiration and am in lockstep with his opinion of rule of law. I do not understand why we need a law to tell people to follow the law. With reference to sanctuary cities, the consequence for being a sanctuary city should include state funding being withheld until compliance is achieved. Very simple.
Rule of law. What will you do to ensure that the rule of law is followed by all cities in Florida, i.e. no sanctuary cities? Anthony.
Well, there's a reason why Larry Metz was my favorite state legislator, and this bill honestly has a lot to do with it. The bill that was referenced beforehand is a bill that would prohibit sanctuary cities. Any bill like it needs to be filed again, and it needs to have two things. One, withholding of funds to state and local government. Number two, needs to be a criminal offense to anyone complicit in its making, whether it's an elected official or anybody else at the local level. That's putting teeth into a bill that will create rule of law. In addition to that, rule of law is a lot of times it's a legal and judicial concept. Just out of law school, I think about a lot of what we can do to make sure we get the right judges like Larry Metz here in Lake County and across the state of Florida. And there's a lot we can do in terms of constitutional amendments and term limits for judges to root out those terrible judges in places like Tallahassee who strike down great bills like Jennifer Sullivan's 24-hour waiting bill for abortion, that we can get rid of those judges, and that we can talk about. Please, we'll talk about that after this.
Vance, give me a number between 1 and 41.
17.
I think that's already been called, but I have not.
18. 19.
17 is still there. This is with dealing with the budget. It says, do you agree or disagree our education budget that consumes 30% of our total budget should be trimmed? How could it be used more effectively? Monica?
Could you repeat the question?
Do you agree or disagree our education budget that consumes 30% of our total budget should be trimmed? How could it be used more effectively?
A slippery slope, because we have some of the most high funding that we've had in historical record on education currently being allocated. Do I think it should be trimmed? In no way, shape, or form. Do I think that our students benefit from greater education and more efficient use of those resources? Absolutely. Do I think part of the challenge in education is also the sizable educational bureaucracy that prohibits our ability to really provide children what they need to be able to get an education that allows them to then live their life? Most certainly. So this is not necessarily a funding issue and whether I think it should be trimmed or shaped or remolded or allocated elsewhere. It's looking at, are those resources being spent per pupil in a way that prepares them through education for their future?
The question, budget. Do you agree or disagree our education budget that consumes 30% of our total budget should be trimmed? How could it be used more effectively? Shannon?
So the issue is, the money is the money. I'm not about to stand here and say I think we're spending too much on education. Matter of fact, I'm not sure we spend enough. What I do think is, as we look at the way the money is spent, we still have this fundamental inequality, and it's driven by these algorithms and these formulas that say the cost of living is here and this is that and the other. These formulas are very, very convoluted, and they serve the people that have the larger school districts, and the smaller areas like ours we get disadvantaged. I'll also tell you there's some very great opportunities for us in public-private partnerships to bring additional resources to the fore. This Health Sciences Academy that we did in Claremont, we brought over $2 million, half from Lake Sumter State and half from the hospital there, to create funding to help to build the building and to educate the students. We can do that over and over again if we can solve the issue, as I've been talking with Bill about the splitting of the FTE. We need to address that, and we need to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Question, again, budget. Do you agree or disagree our education budget that consumes 30% of our total budget should be trimmed? How could it be used more effectively? Anthony?
No, I don't think the problem is the amount of money we're spending. As Florida grows, population grows, the budget will grow. So in terms of a ratio, how many dollars we're spending on kids, it should continue to grow. The problem is, the concern should be how we're spending those educational dollars. One of my biggest issues in Tallahassee is going to be school choice. We need more experimentation, more innovation, more school choice in Tallahassee. We've seen the results. There's countless studies. School choice and charter schools are showing really interesting progress that Florida, thankfully the leader in the nation when it comes to school choice, the second is Ohio, and it's a far cry, needs to continue moving in that direction. And I hope to be pairing up with Representative Jennifer Sullivan on more pro-school choice legislation in Tallahassee. So for me, it's not how much money is being spent, it's how we're spending it. I'm a big fan of the bill that just came through last year that said, you know what, let these charter schools get some of the capital building funds and allow them to build facilities and grow at a faster rate. So, big fan of that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mathias, I've never known you to sit back and not say anything. Give me a number between 1 and 41.
13.
13. What an interesting coincidence. Education.
Man's getting a budget question.
It was
I'm
on
sorry?
education.
Education. Do you agree or disagree that Lake County taxpayers should continue to subsidize per-student funding in other counties? Monica?
This goes back to the concept of fighting for those constituents you represent. Our taxpaying dollars going to subsidize students in other counties seems like a poor use of that tax allocation. Why would it not continue to stay in this particular county? Why would it not continue to stay in support of our constituents' children? Do I support us supporting students or pupils in other counties? Only if our own needs are satisfied in a way that we find adequate would I support that initiative.
Thank you very much. Anthony, education. Do you agree or disagree that Lake County taxpayers should continue to subsidize per-student funding in other counties?
Absolutely not. And I think any of us who understand what it is that our very expert chair of the school board here, Bill Mathias, has done would agree that what's happening is inexcusable. The power of these more urban areas and larger school board districts have essentially achieved a school funding formula that disadvantages the counties that need it most. Lower income counties, semi-rural counties like Lake County are actually getting less money per student than the rest of the state. Honestly, it's a travesty. And I asked Bill, I said, how come you didn't run for this state house seat? Because I knew he would have been great. And he said, had I done it, that would have been one of my number one issues. And so honestly, I think whoever wins this has really, I think they're pressed with taking that issue and fighting harder than ever possible to get that changed and get some of that money back. I mean, these are the children of Lake County we're talking about. I grew up here. I went to K through 12 right here in Lake County. Used to elementary, middle, and high. And our schools are underfunded. Let's work on that.
Shannon, education. Do you agree or disagree that Lake County taxpayers should continue to subsidize per-student funding in other counties?
So obviously not. The only way I could justify any type of income redistribution at the school system level is if these larger, richer school districts down in South Florida were going to be giving it back to where it should have been in the first place by readjusting the formulas. I will tell you that in my experience, the issue really comes down to, as we've already talked about, we have, based on, if you scale against on a graph, the size of the district and the amount of money per student, we fall at the very, very bottom. And I think that that's one of the issues is you can't run a larger school district with lower per student per capita funding. And that's what this formula forces some districts to do. We're not the biggest, but we are significantly disadvantaged. So if we're going to have income redistribution, let's bring that money back from South Florida and get it back into the Lake County school system.
Purnell. Number 1 to 41.
32.
32. This is an audience question, and it says, how can a young adult get involved in the party? Walter? Whoever wrote this question would like to raise their hand. Walter will contact you and we'll get you involved. Don't leave. We have a job for you. Let's start with Monica. How can a young adult get involved in the party? What would you do to make that happen?
Oh, I thought you truly were deferring it to Walter. I would introduce you to James at the end of your row. I would introduce you to Dr. Thompson, who runs the Young Republicans at Lake Sumter College. I would also introduce you to Walter, who's just to your right, who raised his hand. But I would also provide opportunities to mentor what they're looking to contribute. What are they really after? What are they wanting to learn more about? And perhaps what are their future pursuits? Wanting to run for office, wanting to contribute behind the scenes, wanting to be a campaign staffer, campaign supporter, and help guide them in that direction with mentorship while also helping them build relationships.
Thank you very much. Shannon, how can a young adult get involved in the party?
So I'll give you a card. We're going to be walking. And seriously, the way to get involved is simply to get involved. You have young people running for office. You have people who are in desperate need of hearing the message. And most of our young people are not getting the civics lessons that we got when we were younger. So I would say study, learn about the process, and just get involved. 4th of July is coming up. And we have opportunities to volunteer, help set up our booths. We have Flag Day coming up next week. Everything you do that allows you to participate. And there are more and more young people who are genuinely interested in learning about politics and being engaged. And I thank you so much for your interest.
Thank you.
I was going to say one thing before we go into the question, and it's this. It's what I tell everybody who wants to get involved. Know what you believe. Know what you believe. All right? It's not about waving signs. It's not about the name tag. It's not about posting on Facebook and you're wrong and you're horrible and this, I'm the right. And this. It's about knowing what's right. That's what politics is really all about. From the ancient Greeks to the find out first. Make sure this is the right place. The Republican Party, I can assure you, is. But know it. Second, join the party. Honestly, do exactly what I did. I became a precinct committee man, right? Just got involved. What do I have to do to help out? I'm tired of the taxes and everything else. And then, you know what I did? Honestly, it was super random, but it really taught me a lot about the process and the people. I became a poll worker. Be a poll worker. And when you watch it, honestly, it makes democracy come alive. When you're a poll worker, you're watching these people coming in and out, and the excitement and the way people take it, it really changes you. So I would suggest you do that. And I would say to everyone else that I'm a young person, if you saw the front page of the Daily Commercial today and my thinning hair when I was talking to the sheriff, you know I'm not as young as you probably think I am.
Andy, we've been going at this for a few minutes. Would you object to a 5-minute break so anybody that needs to use the restroom or anything, and then we'll start promptly in 5 minutes?
You guys up for a break?
Sure.
Okay, let's make a 5-minute break and then we're going to start at 8 o'clock. Thank you. Are specifically going to do to address this perpetual inequity.
That's a repeat.
Another number, Nan. You were told to follow directions. It says print. They wrote in cursive. 25. Okay. The question is under the topic of miscellaneous. In the area of professional licensing, do you agree or disagree the citizens of Florida are over-regulated by Tallahassee? Monica, I'm going to give you a chance to start.
The short answer is yes. And as the only business owner on the ticket, I will tell you that the process of starting, building, growing, maintaining, and exiting a business is highly over-regulated and in many ways prohibits one's ability to start, build, maintain, grow, and or exit a business. In the area of professional licensure or certification, many times there are licenses. For example, I have paid $26 to Bob McKee for the last several years for a business license. For what? I'm not exactly certain. For the ability to run that business. So there are some licenses that seem perhaps lesser effective, lesser necessary, and there are also some certifications that are perhaps more fee-based than skill or merit-based. So the short answer would be yes on the certification and excessiveness.
Thank you. The question, again, in the area of professional licensing, do you agree or disagree the citizens of Florida are over-regulated by Tallahassee? Anthony.
Absolutely. The Florida Administrative Code, the Code of Regulations governing businesses and other areas of human behavior, is 11.1 million words. It's 174,000 regulations. There's hundreds of thousands of millions of regulations in the federal code. It's absurd. What we need, and I pledge to do, in fact, I was just talking about this today, is a one-in, one-out rule. If not, a one-in, three-out rule. Trump enacted a one-in, two-out rule. Basically, every new regulation you create, you got to take one out, right? Trump did it for two. You got to take two out. Three, honestly, should be the goal. But a good first step is the one-in, one-out rule. It'll reduce the Florida Administrative Code. It'll force us to take a look at some of these old regulations that haven't been analyzed because a lot of legislatures don't like to do it, and force and see which ones are actually harmful and ineffective, and really incentivize the bureaucracy to remove them. And I'm committed to doing that.
Shannon, the question is, in the area of professional licensing, do you agree or disagree the citizens of Florida are over-regulated by Tallahassee?
Like Monica, the little business that I run that is much smaller than hers, pay the same fee every year that is supposed to be a licensing fee, but it's a tax. It always has been, it always will be, and Mr. McKee would actually admit to that that's exactly what it is. The real issue is, why are we so overly regulated? As you know, healthcare, banking, insurance, all of these industries are highly regulated. But what's the root cause? And the root cause is who benefits the most by an inordinate amount of regulation, which puts people at risk for being sued. I don't want to necessarily cast any aspersions, but we live in a highly litigious society, and this state is very, very litigious compared to many other states. We need legislatures that are going to file and run and push bills that favor business, not ones that favor the trial bar.
Thank you. Carla, give me a number.
28.
Second Amendment, something that there's no controversy on. Would you support legislation to allow campus carry on our university campuses? Why or why not? Let's start with Anthony.
Absolutely, it'll be one of the first bills that I file. Gun-free zones are one of the biggest attractors of criminals, okay? You're going to get more school shootings because you know that nobody's armed there. And the fact that we disarmed so many of our veterans included, but all students across Florida's college campuses, is appalling. And so we need to remove those gun-free zones. We need high training. In fact, I'd be okay with boosting the amount of training to make people truly proficient, not just shooting a bow and arrow and a 9mm, but making them proficient to be able to conceal carry in these places. I just left the university. There was a day that went by that I looked around and said, you know what? Somebody could come in here and attack all of us very easily. And like somebody said in one of the last debates, I carry a gun because it's a lot lighter than a police officer to carry. And that's really my philosophy on the subject. But I don't just talk about the Second Amendment. I fought to protect it. We almost sued the city of Eustis when they told a local firearms builder that he couldn't sell his guns at the First Friday festival in Eustis, and we won that battle.
Shannon, Second Amendment. Would you support legislation to allow campus carry on our university campuses? Why or why not?
Absolutely. And, my department chair and my dean, who has retired, and we have a new dean coming, both know that if we get there, then Shannon's going to be the first person to go through the training. I've been concealed carry, now NRA guard. It's a problem when we know we're walking into an environment where there is no possibility that anyone in that room can protect the rest of the people in the room. The real issue is if we have the police plus guardian, then we know that not just the uniformed officer that may be at the front gate of the school, but there anywhere in that building could be someone who is armed and could stop someone if they're trying to harm our kids. That goes everywhere. Churches, everywhere that is a gun-free zone is a place where we're all in danger. So yes, I would support it. I would sponsor it, co-sponsor it, and I would be the first to sign up at UCF.
Monica, Second Amendment. Would you support legislation to allow campus carry on our university campuses? Why or why not?
Yes, indeed, I would. First and foremost, I'm originally from Texas, so let me make it very clear in my opinion on the Second Amendment. I've shot my first gun when I was 12, and ever since I've been a fan. I'm also an NRA member, a strong supporter of our ability to continue to follow the Second Amendment. I think the day and age has come about where gun-free zones are a fantasy as opposed to reality. I think our lawbreakers are going into gun-free zones with guns anyway, and for us to handcuff people figuratively or literally and keep them from the ability to protect themselves when our Constitution provides for that is criminal. So yes, I would allow for, sponsor, and defend the ability for campuses to remove the inability for people to carry, to allow them to conceal carry on campus, as well as in many other places heretofore known as gun-free zones.
Thank you. And I don't know your name. James? Give me a number.
22.
Just don't want to be accusing of calling on people that I know, so we're going to go random here. This is a miscellaneous question. It says, do you agree or disagree that dissolving the South Lake County Hospital District is the right choice for Lake County taxpayers, and why? We're going to start with Shannon.
I thought so. I thought so. I was a registered agent for the district for many years. I can tell you for a fact from the time that that whole property was burned out, orange grove with lantana and cattle, in the face of the oncoming growth that we had, those supported dollars from the community is what helped us grow and keep up with the growth. Over the years, the South Lake District had reduced its millage over time in light of the fact that the property values were going up and there was less money that's needed. I talked to Representative Metz multiple occasions as he was contemplating filing the bill, and after the bill was filed, after session was over. The reality is South Lake Hospital is able to stand on its own right now, and they have been able to grow into the growth. As we've already seen, there's so many rooftops that are already built, but they have a strong partnership, and this allows that partnership, it's going to kind of leverage that partnership to become even stronger. So yes, at this point, it's the appropriate time for that tax to go away.
Thank you. Monica, do you agree or disagree the dissolving of the South Lake County Hospital District is the right choice for Lake County taxpayers, and why?
Indeed I do. The time at which the South Lake Taxing District was established was, correct me if I'm wrong, Shannon, in 1969, I believe.
For ambulances.
Yes, for many, many years ago, and our population has changed, our needs have changed. What Representative Metz did such a wonderful job was in the process of negotiating with the hospital to gain their buy-in. Having met with the leadership of South Lake Hospital, they were also a part of the decision to dissolve the taxing district. One of the concerns was what happens to that $500 million now not funded portion of their services. Would there be services our voters, our constituents would not get as a result of that funding being taken away or the taxing district being dissolved? That not being an issue, that issue being mitigated completely, I 100% support the dissolution of that taxing district, as the hospital should be able to operate in a free market environment and not funded by our tax-paying dollars.
Anthony.
Absolutely, it should have been.
Oh, you can let me.
I have another question. Absolutely, the hospital district should have been removed. But going back to my introductory comments at the beginning, this debate is not about what people say. It's not just rhetoric. It's by their fruits that ye shall judge them. And the people who are on the front lines fighting against the North Lake Hospital District in this last election are the ones who know best. The people who backed my opponent were part of a special interest group that tried to destroy Larry Metz's initiatives. They despise him. He was a courageous fighter for the free market. He wanted a free market, fair free market right here in Lake County. What happened is a lot of the special interests here in Lake County wanted to defend that corporate welfare. And guess what? They kept the North Lake Hospital District. There are a lot of funding, a lot of dark money. The South Lake Hospital had their hands tied. The governor was not a fan of the district. Larry wasn't. Representative Metz was not a fan of the district. They got it pushed through. But it takes courage to do that. Look at who has the courage to push for those free market measures.
Young lady, just put your head on it. Give me a number.
Has 5 been used yet?
I'll tell you in a second. No, it is not.
Okay, there you go.
Question number 5 deals with immigration. Do you agree or disagree that the Florida legislature should do away with sanctuary cities? Why or why not? Monica.
A portion of it, I think, has been asked and answered, but it could be expanded upon. There's a fundamental problem with sanctuary cities in and of that we would be giving sanctuary to people here illegally. What we also have a tendency to do and have the availability to do in this state is for illegal aliens to become attorneys. We also allow illegal aliens by way of that to become judges. We also allow illegal aliens to take precedence over limited university spots by receiving Bright Future scholarships. So this isn't just about sanctuary cities. This is about figuring out how we get people in compliance with the law that if you're illegal in our jails, you go home. And if you are here illegally, we either help you become legal so that you contribute to our tax base while you're using our services, or you go home. So there's perhaps more to that question than simply what was asked initially, if you'll allow me to expand. Thank you.
Anthony, do you want me to read the question? Or okay.
I agree with most of Monica's comments, and I'll expand in a different direction. The sanctuary cities are the product of local government. And one of the most misunderstood questions in Florida today is the issue of home rule. What is home rule? What does it sound good, right? More local government, the better. Well, my first principle is less government is always better. Unless the government is necessary to intrude into an area of human behavior, it has no business being there. And so these local government measures and regulations and the power amassed at the city and county level is gotten completely out of control in Florida's 170-year history. And so we need someone who's going to go up there and take an honest look. They're not going to be popular with their local government elected officials. They're going to take an honest look and say, are these local governments infringing property rights? Are they infringing constitutional rights? Are they following the rule of law? These sort of things. As a city commissioner of the uses for the last 2 years, I was unafraid to speak out on this pretty sensitive subject. And I will absolutely make that a priority to explore that more.
Do you want to go without the question?
Sure. So, after both of these responses, it would be pretty lame for me to say, hey, I think I already answered that. But I will say that to the extent that you believe in the 10th Amendment and federalism, the federal government derives its power from the states and then from the people. As you follow that down the track, there are some pretty significant issues where home rule is appropriate, and we need to acknowledge those. But this is not one of those. This is the opposite of that. This is, the federal law is designed to protect all the citizens of the entire United States, and state law should not be able to constitutionally overrule in any way, shape, or form federal law, just like local laws and regulations should not be able to overrule state law. The real issue comes back to, because we have allowed this to happen, we had laws we didn't follow and we didn't enforce. We've allowed it to happen. Now it's a problem. We start now enforcing the law and building new laws.
Young lady sitting in the back in the white. Yes.
Carol.
Could you give me a number between
Carol.
1 and 41? 26? Miscellaneous. In your opinion, what area or areas require more regulation in Florida? Ooh, that's a good one. Anthony, would you start?
You said more regulation? Honestly, that's a very perverse question for me. I can't really name off the top of my head any area that we don't have enough regulation for. We almost exclusively have too much regulation in every area. And so that's more regulation for any area. I mean, honestly, maybe regulations for local government and what they're doing in terms of creating them, but that would just be a circular. I'm blank. I don't think there's any aspect right now off the top of my head that we need more regulation for in Florida.
You can answer it any way you choose. Shannon, in your opinion, what area or areas require more regulation in Florida?
Yeah, again, we're so heavily regulated already, but what I will tell you is, and I touched on this earlier, that if you look at certain aspects of the law and the way the law works, if you're a plaintiff's attorney and you're working a case, there are many aspects where you get to claim benefits that the plaintiff may not or the defendant may not. I think that our laws have been structured to benefit plaintiffs' attorneys, and I think that those are some issues where we absolutely could look at and say that there needs to be a level playing field. So if I were going to look for places where we would want to impose regulations, those are the kinds of places that I would look, but nowhere else.
Thank you. Monica, in your opinion, what area or areas require more regulation in Florida?
I must say I err on the side with both of my opponents in that is a limited, tiny, narrow area. We do have a tremendous amount of overreach of government. However, there are two areas where I can see this would be appropriate. One is in the area of technology and our oncoming 5G explosion with wireless companies, with internet, with smart cities and the like. As a former wireless executive, I was with Singular Wireless prior to opening my own company. I will tell you it is a detriment for a wireless company or cable company to have to negotiate 400 different contracts with every small municipality, city or town in the state, and every city suffers for that because all the contracts are different. So regulation in an area that allows that to be somewhat simplified and or somewhat consistent for the benefit of an entire statewide area would be one option. Another option would be, and in limited cases, regulations that limit the amount of excessive claims that can be received from areas like workers' comp, or other cases in which an employer suffers greatly because the employee is able to sue through their attorney for several times whatever the incident was worth in the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sue Hooper, give me a number. 33. Protecting the First Amendment. What will you do to protect our First Amendment rights to free speech, vis-a-vis hate speech, restricting and freedom of religion, conscience? I don't understand that.
Freedom of conscience, I wrote it.
Okay.
Freedom of religion, freedom of conscience.
Okay. Let's start with Shannon.
Well, again, if you go all the way back to the Constitution, which is where we should begin every conversation, there's no need to protect that because it's protected by our Constitution. I'm a firm believer in free speech, even when you're saying and doing something that I detest. When I watch a flag being burned, it's almost like it's burning me, and yet I recognize the constitutional right of that person to use that as an expression. So, to say what would I do to protect free speech is I would make sure that we don't infringe on the constitutional right that we have for free speech. I do think that there are certain social issues that have come up that make certain speech inappropriate and hurtful, and I think we should all be looking to limit in our social society by us all and our peer groups and our peer pressure, we should be limiting that. But those people have the right to express themselves under our Constitution.
Thank you. Monica, do you want me to read it again? Or? Okay. What would you do to protect our First Amendment rights to free speech vis-a-vis hate speech, restrictions, and freedom of religion and conscience?
Free speech is something that as a traditionalist exists. And at a state purview, as a state legislature, there are not efforts that are considered in the purview of a state legislature for protecting the First Amendment. It is in existence. I think maybe what we're talking about instead is an issue more close to political correctness. Someone who says something I don't like, or says hate speech, or has a different religious preference, is at liberty to say, think, and or believe consciously what they believe, based on both their right as a human being and our Constitution. My opponent can say things on social media about me. That's their ability to use free speech. There are groups that can say things. Are we looking at government to then manage social interaction and human behavior? And I'm not sure if that wouldn't be an overreach, even in an area where we've all become, in many cases, particularly oversensitive. I am a strong believer in the First Amendment. My first degree is in speech, second is in business. So I'm with you on the First Amendment.
I stand with one of my favorite justices, Justice White, and I'm an absolutist on the question of the First Amendment and free speech. It is the proud boast of our society that we have freedom for the speech in which we hate. I believe in almost essentially no restrictions on free speech. If you're not inciting violence, pure violence, then there should be no restriction on what you can and do say. I would stand with Senator Baxley, our honorable senator here in Lake County, in the legislature, and file bills just like his that came through last year, which eliminated free speech codes on college campuses. Too many bureaucrats in the university system are doing everything they can to try to degrade the First Amendment, and we need to fight them. I would also stand on any effort to reduce the power of local government through restrictive sign codes to reduce people's First Amendment free speech. We saw that last year with the Starry, Starry Night. I got pulled into that news story somehow because we were so vocal on it. And then, of course, when Elaine Simmons, dear friend who's endorsed me, down in Mineola, had a Trump sign, the county bureaucrats beat her up too, and me and Ralph were the first to come to her side. So, thank you.
Walter, you've been quiet all night.
No. Sit down.
I can't read flowers?
Sit down.
Can I bring a flower? I'm going to read it.
David, Jesus. This way.
Can you hand her
Get
flowers?
out. Get out.
Walter, a number, please.
34.
It says, Second Amendment. What are your solutions to address gun violence while protecting Second Amendment rights? Anthony?
I do apologize. Can you repeat the question? I got distracted. It was fine. Everything happening in the room. Can you say it again?
That's fine. We were trying to distract so that we paid attention to the purpose here. What are your solutions to address gun violence while protecting Second Amendment rights?
It's a local government issue in most parts. We just need to ensure we have adequate funding for it. Deputies, amending the Florida statutes allows some of these more arrest-type powers for special security, would allow us to have more security on college and other campuses and institutions without bankrupting the state. And so amending that statute, allowing some of this private security a bigger role in the aspect, adhering to the large consensus of we want more deputies on these college campuses, and of course fortification of the schools, making it in most cases that there's only one entry to the school. But like I alluded to earlier, it's more a problem of the heart than anything else. And I'm always open ears on the subject. It's definitely an evolving subject.
Okay, thank you. Shannon, what are your solutions to address gun violence while protecting Second Amendment rights?
So, again, we've already mentioned, but the gun is not the problem. We know from statistics and from research that the lack of social and emotional preparation for our children, their isolation, their virtual isolation, all of these things predispose the types of people that become gun violence perpetrators. We also understand that as we move forward, you know, the best deterrent for a bad person with a gun is a good person with a gun. And the fact that we have gun-free zones, and I also agree the fact that we have safe First Amendment zones, all of those are problems. They're constitutional problems, but the gun-free zone is a safety problem for all of us. So the first thing I would do would be to make sure that whenever possible we can get rid of gun-free zones, encourage carry by concerned, appropriately trained citizens to help take that threat out of the society.
Thank you. What are your solutions to address gun violence while protecting Second Amendment rights? Monica?
That we stop regulating our citizens in part to our criminals. Until we're able to legislate parenting, this heart issue, and I don't suggest we legislate parenting, this heart issue, nuclear family issue, is leading to a lot of other challenges. I don't believe we have the propensity to address the gun violence issue without looking at it as a band-aid on a bleeding artery. The issue is far larger than that. So for us to continue to legislate what criminals will continue to violate does not address our gun safety issue. Other countries have regulated guns and it created a robust and thriving black market. Other areas have tried to regulate guns and people turned to knives. Do we need to now do car regulation? The gun is not necessarily the issue, and when we start to tell people what kinds of guns they can have, whether they can have a bump stock or not, whether they need to return their bump stock and how old they need to be to buy one, then we begin to infringe on their Second Amendment rights. So I would pursue other areas in order to address the actual problem.
Thank you. We could be here till 9:30 or 10 o'clock, What we're going to do at this point is give each of the candidates an opportunity to sum up and tell us why, in fact, we need to vote for them. And we pulled straws. Anthony, you'll start. You have 2 minutes for this discussion.
Thanks a lot, Don. Once again, I definitely want to thank you for came out tonight. We got a pretty full room, and it's awesome that we all came out here on a night like a Thursday. You got a lot to do, a lot to see, a lot of people to be with, and this is where you came. The Founding Fathers envisioned something I think has been largely forgotten, and that's that we have not just rights, but responsibilities. And one of the most important responsibilities is civic responsibility. Being informed, being involved. And like the young man here tonight, he's on the way to what we're all doing here tonight, and I will always encourage you to do. To sum up where I'm coming from would be largely what I've said, and I think I demonstrated through a lot of this forum tonight. The question is not so much who might be a good choice, who sounds nice or speaks nice. What it's really about is who has a proven, determined, conservative record of largely success on moving forward on these key constitutional issues and quality of life issues for the state of Florida. As a city commissioner in Eustis, I protected prayer at the government meetings, the Second Amendment. We even got term limits put on this fall on the ballot. All of the things people talk about, I've made quite a few enemies pushing and moving the ball forward on in this local community. More importantly than that, I don't believe that this office is simply decision-making power. For me, it's a pulpit. You need to use your office as a pulpit, like the Democrats do. You need to espouse your philosophy. You need to ask, who here has an articulate, conservative vision for this country? Somebody who grew up in this community, loves it, and knows what's best, and will fight for it. Absolutely fight for it. Know the truth and fight for it. And so that's all I'd ask you for you to do tonight, is to look and see who has a coherent, strong, conservative vision paired with a conservative, proven record right here in Lake County. And you'll know everything you get with me. I won't be making many friends in Tallahassee, but I can promise you one thing. I won't let you down. I won't let you down.
Shannon, you have 2 minutes.
Again, thanks for everybody coming out tonight. Thanks, Don, for being our moderator. So people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. We know that. Simon Sinek teaches us, and the message is very, very clear. I had 40 plus years in healthcare, now 5 plus years in higher education. 70 cents on every dollar that we spend in Tallahassee is coming through healthcare and education. Health and Human Services, 90% of that is Medicaid. I will tell you that as I've come through my career, what I've learned is you have to have a fundamental personal value equation if you're going to be successful. In healthcare, one of our value equations is value is equal quality plus service divided by cost. That is enough to take and overlay against all of the decisions and all of the policies that we're going to promote in Tallahassee. Quality plus service divided by cost. The other thing is you have to have a personal leadership philosophy. And it's not something that you just learn in a book. It's something you develop over decades of experience. I'm a principle-centered, relationship-oriented, outcome-driven leader, and I have been for decades. You anchor yourself in the center of your moral principles. And you tether yourself to that chain with to that post with as short a chain as possible. You use relationships to get things done. So being able to motivate, lead, and inspire others, not just with our words, but with our actions and our thoughts and our beliefs, is the key to produce the outcomes. And in the end, we can be principle-centered and we can have wonderful relationship skills. And if we can't produce outcomes, we have not been successful. So all of those three things together, my history, my experience would allow me to take that philosophy to Tallahassee to support this district. Thank you.
Finally, Monica, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Don. And thank you to Lake Federated Women's Club, to Vance for recording, for all of you that were here this evening. It is a privilege, truly, and pleasure to be able to interact with and speak with not only people who are interested, potential voters, but people who have concerns over the issues. And having walked on almost 4,900 doors, we're hearing issues are somewhat healthcare, somewhat Second Amendment. My favorite house is when you walk on the one that says, if you can read this, you're in range. We hear issues about education. We hear, why are my kids faced with Common Core and it sucks? Why are my kids not getting vocational ed? We hear concerns about insurance. We hear concerns about our roads. And in this position, should I have the privilege to represent you, it is about focusing wholeheartedly with our 6 first legislative opportunities in January on those issues most prevalent to you, the voters. And it's understanding that leadership is not only a privilege, but a responsibility. And an opportunity to truly represent and serve in spite of whatever the barriers may be. Make no mistake, this is a giant 3-dimensional chessboard with a lot of moving parts. And you can come in and start to call names and demand, make promises you can't keep. You can come in and start talking about all those who did this wrong and that wrong and brag about those who you think did it right. Or you can come in with the representation of your voters in the forefront of your mind and find the people that you need to connect with to help. And find the people that need to be able to help you to make a difference. That is the reason why I'm running. That is the reason I've taught leadership for the last 29 years. That's the reason I've done leadership for the last 29 years. And it would be a privilege, pleasure, and honor to be of service in this leadership capacity representing you. I look forward to earning your vote, and thank you.
We thank you all for taking time to participate this evening, to be involved, and to learn and educate yourself to make the right decision. We thank the 3 candidates for taking time away from their friends and their family. And with that, we thank you very much.
Thank you, Don Marks. Thank you, Don Marks.